Roy Jones Jr. has revealed that he is set to have a trial in the gym with Anthony Joshua to see if they're a good fit for each other as fighter and trainer. When I first heard this news, my initial reaction was, this is a terrible fit for Anthony Joshua stylistically. If you look at the way Chris Eubank Jr. has developed under Roy Jones, he has picked up a lot of Roy Jones's moves, even the way he stands and throws his jab and everything. His body language even is reminiscent of Roy Jones. But Eubank Jr. is a middleweight. Anthony Joshua is a heavyweight. And Anthony Joshua doesn't have the same speed advantage over most of his opposition, the same degree of speed advantage that Roy Jones had, and probably not even the same degree of speed advantage that Chris Eubank Jr. has over most of his opponents. And as great a fighter as Roy Jones was, and he's one of the greatest of all time, in his prime, he was absolutely phenomenal. A lot of his success and his style was predicated on this freakish athleticism that he had. And when that freakish athleticism started to wane and decline, when he was into his mid to late 30s, then the flaws, the technical flaws in his technique were exposed. That's when he started getting knocked out all over the place. Shots that he was able to avoid because of his tremendous speed and reflexes when he was in his 20s to early 30s were all of a sudden catching him. And this is why his contemporaries, some of his contemporaries like Bernard Hopkins, were able to go on longer than he was, having success, because they had solid technique to fall back on. Whereas with Roy Jones, too much of what he did was based on this freakish athleticism. So, again, with Anthony Joshua, if Roy Jones tries to turn AJ into a clone of him at 240 odd pounds, that sounds disastrous to me. That just sounds disastrous. However, I watched this video, or listened rather, to this video by Outmatch Boxing. Fantastic video. And he made some very, very good points, which I just want to expand on here. One of the first points I remember him making is that Roy Jones has an infectious confidence about him. And if, as most people seem to be in agreement on, Anthony Joshua's biggest problem is psychological, then maybe Roy Jones could actually help him a lot. Because Roy Jones, as Outmatch said, does have this infectious confidence. And being the pound for pound number one for so many years, he knows all about the psychology of being a winner. I imagine, I've obviously never been to Roy Jones's gym, but I would imagine that he makes training fun because of his infectious confidence, his enthusiasm, his positive attitude and all that kind of thing. And maybe that would actually work wonders for Anthony Joshua from a psychological perspective, because from a technical point of view, yeah, there are things you can work on with Anthony Joshua. You can tweak certain things, but you're not going to completely overhaul him stylistically at this stage. So if you can focus more on working on the mental side of AJ, I think that's going to bear fruit. Although one thing I will say, if Roy Jones, hopefully, if they work together, doesn't try to turn AJ into a clone of himself, he can maybe help to build on some of AJ's strengths. And one of AJ's strengths, an aptitude that he has, is throwing a left hook. AJ has one of the most underrated left hooks in the heavyweight division. If you go and watch the second round of the first Andy Ruiz fight, you'll see AJ land several beautiful lead left hooks on Andy Ruiz. Sends the spray flying everywhere. Never mind the hook that he drops Andy Ruiz with in the third round. No. Go look at the second round where he's leading with the hook. Now, who used to lead with their hook in their prime? Which all-time great fighter was an expert, a master at leading with their left hook? Roy Jones Jr. Okay, now Roy Jones Jr. used to lead with his hook in such a way because he would have his left hand dangling oftentimes down by his knee. Sometimes he would have his left hand up, but other times his left hand, his jabbing hand, would be dangling down by his knee somewhere. And he would bring his left hand up as if he was going to throw a jab, so straight, but he would then turn his fist from, knuckles facing down to the knuckles facing the side, what Chris Andre refers to as a shovel hook position. And then he would almost with a straight arm launch himself at someone with this, again, almost straight arm. And it would then turn into a hook just before the moment of impact. And this was a very deceptive punch thrown with incredible speed. Very deceptive because the opponent thinks there's a jab coming at them. So oftentimes they would put their glove out to parry, their glove out in front of their face to parry it. But of course, the punch is coming from a different angle at that point. It's not coming directly from the front, it's coming from the side. It's a hook, it's hitting you on the chin, and now you're on the canvas. Just go and look at Roy Jones's fight with Tony Thornton to see an example of what I'm talking about. Throws it from a low position, he brings it up as if it's a jab, and then literally just before the moment of impact, he turns it into a hook. Anthony Joshua actually does that, not quite the way Roy Jones did it, but something similar. And you can see it in the second round against Ruiz. So maybe Roy Jones can help him tweak that, get him to use it more. Obviously, when you're dealing with lead left hooks, you need to be very, very careful because you can easily walk into a big right hand and leave yourself open. So you have to know when and when you can't do it. Is Roy Jones the best guy to teach him that? Well, we'll see. I think that when you're trialing with a trainer, it needs to be more than just a week. If it's just a week, then you're basically just trying to see if your personalities can gel. But in terms of finding out if your ability can gel with the trainer's style or their teaching style, that's going to take longer. You're going to need to be with them for, I want to say, at least a month. You're going to need to actually spar in their gym and have them tell you certain things to do in sparring. And, you figure out whether that works, whether what they're telling you is actually bearing fruit for you. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, certainly the mental attitude of Roy Jones could rub off on Anthony Joshua and be a very, very good thing. But from a technical perspective, just like Outmatch Boxing says, the jury is out about whether that's going to be a good fit for AJ. And again, this is just a trial. It isn't like AJ is definitely going to be with Roy Jones now. But I am starting to maybe not be so averse to the stylistic matchup because there's no guarantee that Roy Jones is going to try and just turn him into a heavyweight version of himself, which would look absurd, right? That would not work out well. But if he can just tweak certain things rather than trying to overhaul his style, obviously work on his fluidity. And AJ in some previous fights has been quite fluid. If you go back and look at when he fought Alexander Povetkin, he was pretty fluid in that fight after the first couple rounds. In fact, that's the most fluid I can remember seeing him. Some people would say the Ruiz rematch or even the first Ruiz fight, he was relatively fluid by his standards. But no, I would say in the Povetkin fight, he was more fluid than he was in those two. And in the Ruiz rematch, even though he was moving around and his arms seemed quite relaxed, he was still very, very upright. Whereas against Povetkin, he wasn't so upright after the first couple rounds. When he started moving about, that was some quite nice boxing he did there. If Roy Jones can get him back to some of that, and obviously as a fighter, particularly in the heavyweight division where there are so many different styles, you're going to have to be a chameleon. One style is not going to get it done against everybody. Tyson Fury is where he is right now because he is that chameleon. He can switch up his style and do different things. And of course, he has the elite level confidence that Anthony Joshua lacks. Fury, Usyk, and a number of other fighters in the heavyweight division have this elite level confidence. Roy Jones, of course, has elite level confidence. So again, maybe that can rub off on AJ. So those are my thoughts on this potential pairing. And of course, a lot of people are talking about how it's not good for AJ to keep going from one trainer to the next because it just shows how confused he is. Maybe it does, but maybe this is a process that he just has to go through in order to, I don't know, get what he's looking for in terms of You know, because look, there are only so many trainers in the world. You can't keep on switching trainers after every fight to the end of your career. At some point, you're going to have to settle down with someone, you know, or you're just going to get bored of looking for different trainers, right? So maybe this is just a process he has to go through. And while he's going through this process, this is why I think it's very important for him to be brought back slowly against lower level opposition. You don't want to throw a fighter who's as uncertain about what he should be doing and who he should be training with as AJ is. You don't be throwing someone like that in at the deep end. That's not a good idea. Now, with the Dillian Whyte situation, you know, Dillian Whyte's fighting Jermaine Franklin, and basically Eddie Hearn has settled on AJ fighting the winner. Even though Dillian Whyte has been a quality heavyweight in the past, we don't know where he's at right now. And AJ has knocked him out before. So normally I wouldn't say that it's a good idea for AJ to fight someone the level of a Dillian Whyte right now. But given the fact he has knocked him out before, and Dillian Whyte's punch resistance is looking very shaky these days, then maybe it's an okay fight for him, you know. So anyway, that's my take on the situation with Roy Jones. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below.